Well, I want to welcome everyone to the Primetime at the BU Library. I'm going to say just a few remarks, then hand it over to Edwin. To begin with, here, this is a collaboration today of the Friends of the BU Library, along with the Office of Diversity and Inclusion and Campus Ministries. And so I just want to thank both of those, all three of those offices for partnering today. Another quick reminder that the next Primetime event is happening on Thursday, May 3rd at 10:10. It'll be Sam Mulberry who'll be presenting on You Can't Get There From Here, or How I Stopped Worrying and Loved the Idea of Online CWC. So, come if you want to learn more about that. I'm going to pass things over to Edwin. Edwin, I get the great joy of working with him this year with the trip. He was our student leader, helped do a tremendous amount of organizing with this trip. And one of the aspects of Sankofa is student development and student leadership. And really, so I'm going to pass the mic off, and this is going to be students sharing their experience and talking about how this trip has shaped them. And I am so proud of each one of them. It was a joy for me to be able to travel with this team. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Edwin.
All right. Again, thank you all for coming and taking this opportunity to hear voices that are unfortunately often muted in our society. This is also a time, as Hennon said, where students get to share their stories and their perspectives on things, and just really emphasize the importance of the voices that our youth today has to offer. So I'm just going to go over really quick about what Sankofa is and why it's important, and then pass off the mic to the participants of Sankofa this year. So Sankofa is a trip dedicated towards looking back at our past and learning from those who have come before us in order to move forward so that we can make a path for those to come. We venture out on this trip to learn about the American struggle for civil rights, justice, and the beloved community. For many of us, looking back at America's history is not a pleasant encounter. It isn't easy to look back at a history so corrupt and troubling as the one that this country was built off of. Some tend to ignore that it ever happened and choose not to confront its impact on today's society. But there are others who recognize its importance and understand that the issues that Americans faced then are still present today, and as a result find it necessary to do something about it. And that is what we aim to do as a trip, to encourage people to choose not to be complacent, but recognize that there must be something done and that they possess the power to do something about it. In Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it reads, "Do not conform to the customs and behaviors of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds." And I truly believe that this trip really emphasizes the importance of that. We are faced with a society that, as I mentioned, has become very complacent and chooses not to look back at its past and its impact on today's society. But God also tells us that it's important for us to look back and understand the importance of not conforming to what the world today is like, to be a part of it but not of it. And as we venture out into this trip, we go through some sites that were really prolific moments in our history that really made up the society we have today. It is because of the people who fought during the civil rights movement that really left footsteps on this planet that we all have been able to look towards and follow. Throughout the sites that we go to, we take this tour on the bus, on a big bus, so we spend a lot of time together, a lot of really, really tight space. So we get to know each other really well, and we get to do a lot of discussions and a lot of singing that revolve around documentaries that we watched throughout the trip. And at the same time, we also just have some time to just get to know each other, Before the trip, we have a retreat where we can sort of introduce one another. But it isn't up until the trip where we really get to dive into really getting to know each other and where we stand in life, and just kind of really recognize how important it is to unite, because it is through unity that we can confront the issues and face them, so that we don't feel alone, but instead we feel like we're with somebody in this struggle. We also hear from living history, people who were there during this time and who experienced a lot of the racist and unfortunate events that this country was built off of. We're able to hear their stories and just the impact that had on their lives. And the beautiful thing to see was that even though they went through all those really unfortunate events, they were still able to come out on top and do something with their lives, and recognize that even though we all have our fair share of struggles, that at the end there is some light at the end of the tunnel. And I think that's also one of the things that we also try and tell the students who participate in this trip, who have recognized that this is a fallen world, but that in the end there is light. At the end of the tunnel there is light. These are a couple sites that we look at, go through, in order to understand more of what this history was like. We meet, this is one of the people we meet, Living History, Reverend Robert and Jeanine Gretz, who were Rosa Parks' pastors. It was just an amazing time getting to hear what they went through, their story as white people in this racist time, being basically someone for people of color to come to and find some healing with, because it wasn't just, all white people that were causing harm to their lives, but there were also those that were also by their side and willing to fight for them, and who also suffered a lot. They had, a couple of houses of theirs were blown up because they were allies with African Americans and whatnot. So we're really able to hear basically just people who were there during this time and who really experienced all of that. We also were able to check out Martin Luther King and his wife's grave. It was a really important time in our trip because it was near the end of our trip, where we got to really invest in basically one of the, if not the biggest leaders in the civil rights movement, and the work he put towards liberating the people of color, the community of people of color, from their oppression against what was unfortunately something they were facing in that time. This is another one of our living history, Dr. Josephine Bradley, who was one of the first African Americans to segregate a school in Westboro, North Carolina?
Greensboro.
Greensboro, North Carolina. And at the end of the trip, we venture out to Highlander, which is a center that aims at basically teaching anyone really, regardless of your status in academics or class. It just aims at teaching individuals about how to become activists in their communities, and basically spread the word of spreading justice wherever they can. And this is a place that I myself really appreciate, because we're all able to come together and reflect on basically what we've all been going through, the history we've seen, the unfortunate events that we were exposed to, and basically use all of that to come up with ways in which we can bring what we saw to apply to our lives today, so that we can do something to change the complacency that we are surrounded by. And this bird here, it's called Sankofa, and it means basically what it symbolizes. It symbolizes looking back at what is in the past so that we can move forward. And as I said earlier, this trip is basically exactly what this symbolizes, a time to really look back at our history so that we can move forward and use those events to encourage us and to motivate us to create change. And before we move on to hearing the participants, I just want to read off a quote that I think also adds on to why it is important. This is a Native American proverb that reminds us of how it is important for all of us to be united. It says, "Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Walk beside me, that we may be as one." So with that said, I just want to invite students here who are going to share a little bit of what they experienced on this trip. We had them write out basically the spoken word or whatever they felt that would get across the message of what their experience has been like. And they chose to do a spoken word that basically represents what their time during this trip was like. So I'll let them do the talking for themselves.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on walking, keep on talking, marching on freedom's way.
So yeah, we're not the only people who went on the Sankofa trip, but we got broken up into groups, and this was the best group because we had I mean, yeah. So our group has that. But yeah, so all of our things are different, and it's because we all experience them different. So hope you enjoy. All right. Okay. Throughout my journey, I've come to find that coming in, I saw nothing but opportunities to experience. Coming out, I see nothing but experiences to bring about opportunities. It was more than just standing where MLK had stood and marching where marches had marched. It was examining my mindset and finding my place in my own family's history. I have come to realize that I am a product of my parents, and they are products of their own society. My father, who's a product of the racist South and the prejudiced North, and my mother, who's a product of white privilege. I'm confined by these identities, but through learning about my history, I know that I am able to break these boundaries. I can confine myself to a higher standard, not on today's society's radar. Okay. Anyways, one that consists of desire to learn and to change, that has been unheard. When I would look into the eye sockets of the empty KKK robes, too much of my family's painful history came alive. But so did hope, the hope that God provides. These robes had no power over me, for God has healed and brought about new deals. I have overcome. This community has overcome. With hope in our hearts and peace on our hands, together we will stand. For now our lives are dedicated to reconciling.
Amen. Throughout this journey, I have found that there are 7 things I want to clarify. 1, my name is Andrew Michael Rahmi, not Rami, Ram, or Rami, Rahmi. 2, I am black, Lebanese, and Mexican. Those cultures form me, and they are a part of who I am, but they do not define me, and they cannot control me. I belong to God before I belong to anyone else. 3, despite what I've been told, despite the dysfunctional order our society seems comfortable being trapped in, everyone is equal and deserves the same rights. 4, everyone deserves rights. No matter race, gender, sexual orientation, religion, or disability, no one person is better than the other. 5, despite what certain leaders in our faith would like us to believe, Jesus loves everyone. 6, I will do everything in my power to crumble the system we are trapped in. My people, and everyone's people, never stop fighting, and I will pick up where they left off. 7, I love everyone, and no matter how hateful a person can act, they have love in them too.
Throughout my journey, I have found This is day one. I'm scared. I've had to open up and be honest with people already. I'm afraid to trust people. Day 2. I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I've been through so much and I don't want to do this alone. Day 3. I'm learning. Even though I can't quite voice my feelings, music can help me understand my own emotions. Day 4. I'm encouraged. Talking with my group makes things seem possible. I'm feeling changes in my relationships. Day 5. I'm worried. I need this to go back to Bethel. Day 6. I don't know what to do. Relationship requires trust. Trust requires honesty. Honesty requires more than I feel I can handle. Day 7. I'm touched by the community we have built and the honesty with which we relate. Day 8. I'm ready. Ready to trust my group, even when we rejoin the real world. I'm scared, but now I'm not alone. These excerpts from my journal tell my story.
Throughout my journey, I have come to find my name is not just a word. It's not an embarrassment or left to be unheard, not affected by the picture the society has painted, not contributing to a simulation just to feel acquainted. I was ashamed. I felt like every time my classmates abused my name, the sacrifices of my parents and grandparents grew faint, till it was no longer existing in my mind frame. Have I forgotten my language, my culture, my people, my name? Breaking bonds with the lies, unfolding, revealing, rebuilding. Stories of heroes from the civil rights paving the way for us so that we might remember our past, so that we can move forward to make the dream last. Now I have learned that I must do. Now I've learned what I must do, searching back into my history to learn what is true, find peace and healing from the struggles and pain. But first, what is my name? My name is my mother's creation, what my grandmother calls me, a story stemming from my Hmong culture, the butterfly in the morning dew. Gulumbeyan Baluvan. My name is Baluve.
Through my uncomfortable journey to the south, I have learned about the all-consuming unity of the beloved community. We may lay down our lives for the sake of the brethren, yet not only for the brethren of us who are alive today, but for the lives of our children and our grandchildren. It is true that this eternal flame can grow all the more brighter if we become intimate and become close with one another. As we pondered during our gaze at the campfire on top of a smoky mountain, that more logs create a more powerful flame when joined together. Yet they must respect the space when they lay beside, lest we suffocate the flame and the blaze that is in between us. Let our common goal be this, to be peace creators, peace maintainers, rather than declaring war against the other. Throughout our journey, we have come to find, to learn with our hearts and with our minds. As individuals, we once were blind, but we grow stronger as our lives intertwine. Amen.
So I'm African American and white, and coming on the Sankofa trip, I thought, it was going to be fun. It's like, I can't even lie. So I thought it was going to be fun. My friends were coming on it, and dude, it was going to be like spring break, freshmen, and, learn about civil rights on the way as a side effect. But it kind of wasn't like that a lot of the time, and it made me, like, if anything, the one thing I really learned is how the white side of my family was so, like, real in the civil rights, which, my mom doesn't know really where she comes from or, like, where her family is involved in. So when I would look at a KKK robe, I could see, like, wow, like, that could have been my great-great-uncle or something. Like, my mom doesn't even know and I don't know, and I could be thinking, like, oh, wow, my mom's family could have been chasing my dad's family around because my grandma is from North Carolina and, like, the whole South. So it's just really interesting to go on this trip thinking I was going to learn about African Americans and how they have been affected. And I came out learning more about how white people and how that could be in my life. So, yeah.
Okay, well, I went to Sankofa to learn about race mainly in our country, I guess, but I learned a lot more. I learned about race and who God was and how we relate to God. I don't know. I learned a lot. You learn a lot. There's so much more to the things that happen in our country than we think about. Like, we want to blame one group, but it's kind of everyone plays a part in it, and that it's more complex, I guess, and it's more difficult. And it's a lot of work, but yeah.
I went on the trip because I'm a reconciliation major, and I was just excited to learn, I think, and it's facts and interesting things, and it's a lot more than that. I ended up learning like 12 times more about myself than I think I did about anything else. I learned that I can trust people. I learned that these 4 people up here are here for me and a part of my life now and will be here for me the whole time. And and that was really hard. That was really hard for me to come to and to open up to that and not just, go on this journey by myself. And that was, I think, one of the hardest things for me to come to, is that I couldn't do this myself and that I had to open up and allow people to help me through this journey. And it was amazing, and it was so worth it, and I'm so glad I trusted them.
So on the trip, as you already have heard, it was really overwhelming with just learning so in depth about the pain and the struggles and the injustice. And just to help me reflect, I decided to not think about, considering it, but not to just focus on this whole civil rights movement, but I decided to reflect on myself and in what ways have I contributed, or in what ways have I been ignorant to it. And so I decided to focus on my name, and that's what the product of what I was reading about, because I did struggle with whether my first name is Baulu and middle name is Becky, and I've been called Becky my whole life. And I think that was because I didn't want to feel comfortable with people mispronouncing my name or making fun of it. So I really came to terms. It's just I accept my name, I accept myself, this is who I am. And this trip really, really brought about those qualities.
So a common question that was asked about me is, Garrett, what was your most favorite exhibit, for lack of a better term, during the trip? What was the most powerful for you? And I really couldn't put a finger on it, because it was always the most recent display or the most recent exhibit, because it was history was not suspended, but it was actually coming alive for me. It was starting to come into color and more three-dimensional. And so the most recent was the Martin Luther King Jr. District in the outskirts of Atlanta. And the first thing that I saw when I stepped off the bus was this 9 to 10 foot statue, and the statue was called Behold. And it was a figure of a man, just this really powerful looking man holding up just this small newborn infant, and he is declaring, raising his child up to the heavens and saying, "Behold, something that is greater than myself." And that just spoke volumes for me. I was never into the arts before coming to Bethel. Thanks, Bethel, for getting me interested in the arts. So it was just speaking so many words to me, this statue, that we live not only for us who are alive today, that is essential, but we are going to create a context, and we're going to create a setting that our grandchildren or our babies are going to inherit someday. I came to a painful realization during the trip that my grandparents' names were Sailor and Wright. And back in European antiquity, what your last name was what you did. My great grandparents were shipwrights, and they were sailors. They probably weren't wielding the whips in the South, but they were perpetuating, probably making these ships and driving these ships that were transporting all these Africans to the Americas. And my family may have benefited from this economy. And so I just came to all those painful realizations and got a lot of work to do, I guess. I don't know how much more time I have, but I think that'll be good. All right.
We'd like to open up this time for some Q&A if you have some questions. So Q&As are for them, so feel free to ask them all your questions if you'd like.
Can any or all of you speak to what now is different to be back at school after this and looking ahead to next year? I know this year is almost done, but looking ahead to next year, what's different now coming back?
Well, on the trip, we kind of we discuss how we make fun of ourselves in a sense. Like, we'll make jokes and we'll think it's okay. But coming back, we realize it in ourselves and we realize it in our friends. So we hold each other accountable now. And when we start to hold our friends accountable for us and, for them, we can start holding people who aren't as close to us accountable. And then it's kind of like a ripple effect of, hey, that's not a funny joke. Even though it used to be funny, it's not funny anymore.
What changed for me the most was just this idea of, not just an idea, but an embodied idea of true community. I don't think I've ever experienced a more authentic, anti-shallow. I guess I don't experience at the macro level of our Bethel community. I know we advertise it a lot on how healthy we are as a community, but I really think at the macro level we're at a shallow level of an honest conversation, and it was just great to experience a true community, something that has been imbued with prayer and honest dialogue and getting to the issues on what separate us. So just the need for a more authentic community. Thank you.
I think what changed for me is that I noticed a lot that, well, everywhere has a lot of injustice, but Bethel has a lot of injustice too, socially wise, and that how comfortable everyone got with it because it's so normal. And you just notice a lot. I just notice a lot more things about things that people do or say, and the things people do to make themselves feel uncomfortable so everyone else feels comfortable. That's what I've noticed. It ever since I've been back, it's what's changing.
I think the biggest change I guess I've seen or difference in me is just being more aware. I think being more aware of what's going on around me and with my friends and within myself, being aware of my contributions and my white privilege and and I think before this trip I've seen things and I felt things, but I've never felt like I had such a strong community to go to. I really do feel like I could go to any person on this trip and talk to them and ask them questions, and I don't know, that's really empowering, I guess.
And so I basically second what everyone said. But something for me was that I became curious about my past, just to go along with what Sankofa really meant about what my Hmong culture was, and I feel like that's really, really been drifting away from my experience throughout my life, and so I began to value my culture more and dig deeper into what that means so that I can move forward.
Any other questions?
I would just affirm this work you're doing around identity, which we all need to do. So you remind us of that as well. But you know, your name, the importance of your name and your identity, and your background, digging into that. I just find with your presentation very encouraging, but also challenging that we get to our 50s, we sometimes think we don't have any more work to do, but we do. I mean, this is kind of a lifetime work. So I appreciate that. Appreciate how you remind us of that.
Garrett, I was wondering, you mentioned that we at Bethel do things at a very shallow level. Are there some things that you'd like to tell us that we could do in order to address that?
Yeah, I would say, as a white male going on this trip, how do you get? I think it was Dr. Brooks that said on the trip, how do we get everyone to come on this trip? How can you not just explain all these worldly theories in the classroom and not necessarily put a face to this issue and to this problem? I would say what we really need to do is preach against passivity, and I guess the only way to do that is to preach, to pray and to preach, and to be extremely serious about what has happened in history, because it's not isolated. We've inherited it, and we have to redeem. We need to be peacemakers and peace maintainers. That was the end of my my poem, which is really kind of going against the worldly patterns. Romans 12, right? A common tool that's used with governments and with people and with groups is to just let's create an enemy now. Let's create an other. And that's used to form unity within this group, but our criteria as Christians is much different. We are peace maintainers and peace creators. This is what unifies us. We don't just declare war against someone. So I think we just need to maybe make that come more alive as peacemakers and maintainers at Bethel. That's a quote we use around here. Take it seriously.
I have one more question for all of the Sankofa participants. What are the kinds of things that you're doing to keep this flame burning? It sounds like you guys were ignited on this trip. What are you doing to keep that flame burning?
My name's Sydney, for those of you who don't know me. I started going to Peacemakers. It's a branch of United Cultures of Bethel through BSA, and Renata Thielen is the leader of it. And I just found it really encouraging and empowering to talk about what it means for me to be white and how I look at issues of racism and what's my responsibility in the midst of that. And so it's been a really healing time for me, and it encourages me to keep seeking, to keep talking about this, to continue with the work instead of just being passive. So.
I think one of the things that I've been doing is when I am there have been occasions where race has come up since Sankofa in conversations that I've had, and you can't really be blunt with people because of Minnesota Nice, so I use my journalistic skills and I ask questions. So, and through that, I think that by asking them questions doesn't necessarily, it kind of pushes them to think about it versus me just telling it how it is, because obviously if I tell you, it might not make sense, but if you think about it, then maybe you can put the pieces together. So just asking questions and just letting them kind of figure it out on the way, but not being so pushy about it or blunt. So.
All right, we can give him just another round of applause. We have time for one more, or for time's sake, I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'm just to talk about keeping the flame going. Or the question would be, what questions do you wish people would ask you, sort of going forward? Because it's, to think about how do you engage in the community moving forward, or, how do we have this macro conversation? So, if you have thoughts, what do you wish people would ask?
I think that's a lot. I wish people would ask me like, "What's your experience?" Because I've learned, I've noticed a lot of people kind of like try to tell you how it's like, and like try to tell you what you're actually experiencing, and like what it actually means. And you're like, "Dude, you don't know me. Like, what do you mean?" So I just wish people would ask you what your experience was, and actually listen to you, and not try to change you what you think.
Yeah, and saying that, it's not even what people will ask, but what people will believe. Because if I'm like, it's hard being a minority at Bethel, and people are like, no, it's not. Like, we have reconciliation. We talk about that stuff. And I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like, so it's not really like, hey, what's your experience? And like, because I can ask Garrett, what's your experience as a white male at Bethel? And he'd be like, no, I don't even have an experience. Like, that means nothing, but really taking my truth to be your truth. And it's not like, oh, like it's always hard at Bethel, but like understanding that there is struggle in there, and just like taking that to be like true, and not being like, well, since I don't feel it, it can't be real, like type thing.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah. Saying that it doesn't take just a trip of like Sankofa for all of us to get involved in areas that we know need change. In fact, I challenge you all to do something about the things that you're surrounded by, that require change, that it's something that God is in favor of. You're all basically from here on out equally responsible to doing something. And if you don't, let's be honest with ourselves, you're conforming. I just want to end with this quote by one of just someone I really look up to. He was a liberation theologian in my country of El Salvador. His name is Oscar Romero. He was unfortunately martyred for standing up against the injustices of the elite in El Salvador, for standing up for the poor. And I want to end with this quote. It says, "We know that every effort to better society, especially when injustice and sin are so ingrained, is an effort that God blesses, that God wants, and that God demands of us." So thank you all for coming, and Sankofa will be around next year as well. So again, if you're interested, Dan and I and Leon would love to talk to you. So do something about this wicked world. Thank you.